Travelling with ulcerative colitis can seem like an impossible task, but I'm here to say that it can be done. My name's Jacob, and over my past 10 years of living with ulcerative colitis, I've been to Florida, Amsterdam, and on trips around my own country in the UK. And on this holiday in particular, I had just got out of the hospital with life-threatening ulcerative colitis. So today I wanted to share with you what it's like to travel whilst dealing with the symptoms of an ulcerative colitis flare, because it was quite challenging, and I think you're going to learn a thing or two for when you want to travel yourself. And if you stick around to the end of this video, I'm going to break it down into some key points that you can take away, like what to consider before you go on holiday and what you can do while you're away. So I'm going to start this video off by talking about my trip to Florida. It was an amazing trip, and I went there for 3 weeks, and I went on all the rides. I went to Disney World, I went to Universal Studios, I went on all the rides, and overall it was just a once in a lifetime trip. And while I was there, I did indeed run into a lot of stress and get some ulcerative colitis flare symptoms. So let's talk about taking medications abroad. At this time, I was taking mesalazine. So I brought the mesalazine in its original packaging in the box that I was given when I got it from the pharmacy. And I did this so if anyone wanted to look through my bag and look at the medications and the drugs that I was bringing, they could see straight away that it was in an official box and it was untampered with, just to make sure that there was no other drugs in there. And because of this, I had no problems taking my medications abroad. So while I was away, I did have a stressful situation where I had to do some work, and there was a work crisis that I had to resolve while I was away. And following this, I did have some blood in my stool. So what did I do to deal with these flare symptoms that had arisen while I was away? Well, anytime that I experienced pain, I would just lie down and wait for it to pass. And regarding the blood, the only thing I could do was stick to my medications and just make sure that things aren't getting worse. Luckily, the flare didn't get too bad, and it remains just some blood in the stool, and I was able to just overlook it for the time that I was away. So let's talk a little bit about sleep. And before I went to Florida, I was actually quite a nocturnal person. I would usually be up late into the night, and I would wake up in the late morning, even the afternoon. So when I got to Florida, I was actually in tune with the time zone of America, and I was getting up at 7 a.m. naturally in America, and I thought, wow, this is the place that I really belong. And I was getting some great sleep, and I think this contributed to the fact that my flare did not progress past just a bit of blood, because I was actually getting some great sleep while I was there. So this raises a good point that if you're going away, sleep is one of your top priorities. I mean, sleep is a priority anyway, but while you're away, definitely make sure you get the sleep that you need. So diet. This was a tough one while I was in America, and I did make a concerted effort to get healthy foods from the local shops. I was eating a lot of oats and blueberries, the same stuff that I eat here, but I did find it harder to make sure that I was well fed and I was happily eating all the vitamins and minerals that I needed. Because when I was walking around the theme parks, they would often just sell these burgers, and I was getting really sick and tired of burgers. So what I did was I actually packed my own lunches. I didn't pack enough, but I would pack these little wraps. Again, it's not the best food to eat, but I would put in some ham and just make sure it was as clean as possible. I wasn't so as hot on my diet then as I was now, but I would make my own wraps so I didn't have to buy theme park food, because I thought that the food from the supermarket was better than the food from the theme park. But I did eat a lot of food from the theme park, because at the end of the day, I got hungry while I was there. I ran out of food. It was really, really hot, and I needed to keep myself fed and, keep my nutrition and especially my hydration levels. I was sweating a lot while I was in Florida because it's so hot. And this leads me on to drinks. There are water fountains everywhere there, so I was very thankful for that. But sometimes I really felt like I needed to top up my electrolytes. The only option I had while I was there was to use the machines and get Gatorade. And that is not something that I ever touch on my day-to-day life. But while I was there, I took advantage of the fact that these drinks have electrolytes in them, and I drank them throughout the day, because it's better to keep your hydration levels up than to let yourself get dehydrated and only drink water. So if you're going somewhere hot, please do consider keeping your electrolytes topped up. Exercise-wise, I did try to continue working out. There was a gym at the place that I was staying at, and it was really hot, and I actually found it very hard to maintain my physical activity in terms of weightlifting. I was doing plenty of walking around the theme parks, but I did make an effort to go to the gym and lift what I could, because I felt like that was still important, and I just tried my best. Even though they weren't the best workouts, I just did what I could. So while I was away on my trip in Florida, I was very thankful that my symptoms did not progress past a bit of blood in my stool. Because if they did progress past that, I'm not really sure what I would have done. Maybe I would have had to use the American healthcare system, which would have drained my money. So if you're going somewhere like that, do look into getting some health insurance and make sure that you're in a healthy state before you go. And if you do think you're coming up against a flare while you're there, just try and manage it as best as you can. So give yourself the time to rest, make sure you're getting your sleep, feed yourself as best as you can while you're there, and just remain active. And hopefully your flare will not get worse. So let's talk about the time that I mentioned at the start of the video when I went traveling when I just got out of hospital. So I went to this place called Parcs in the UK. And at Parcs, the idea behind it is that you go there, your car is parked, and while you're on the park at Parcs, you're not allowed to drive. You have to cycle everywhere or walk. So it's supposed to get you like active. You're out in like the forest, there's trees everywhere, there's activities for you to do. And overall, it's just to get you a little bit healthier and away from the city. And I love the fact that there were no cars. That was a nice feeling, that there was no sound of cars. You could hear the birds in the morning. But I was under extreme fatigue from coming out of the hospital. So over this time, I had been very sleep deprived because I was on these oral steroids to reduce my inflammation. And I had basically been running on very little sleep despite my best efforts. So while I was there, I was get so very, very fatigued. I'd do an activity for maybe an hour and then I'd have to go and nap. I'm not a person that takes naps, but while I was there, I was definitely a napper. There was nothing I could do except I had to, take an hour or two to just get additional sleep. If you decide that it's time to travel and you've just come out of hospital, fatigue is going to be real. And while I was there, it was like I was a traveling pharmacist. I had so many pills that I brought with me. I had my mesalazine, I had my steroids, I had all of my supplements, so I brought all my vitamin Ds, my omega-3s. I brought everything that I could think of. I brought sleeping pills, everything. And something that actually really struck me was, I think this was because I was in the healing process of this horrible flare, was the fact that I kept getting these really painful hemorrhoids, or they might have been fissures for all I know. Anyway, they were very painful, and I'd go to the bathroom and it would feel like passing glass. And I'll be honest, the only thing that got me through this holiday was these suppositories that numb everything. And it says to not use more than like one every 4 hours. I was way past that. I was popping these suppositories as often as possible because I'd go to the bathroom, it would really hurt. And what happens if you don't use a suppository? It's like this very intense, insane itching in your butthole. And it's like infuriating. Like I come down in a sweat. It's like I get very, very agitated, very intense. And that was every time I go to the bathroom. So I pop the suppository in. And then it might be like, well, I've got to go to the bathroom. I've just put the suppository in. And I'll be straight back in the toilet. And then I'll be like, well, I need the numbing because I could not deal with this pain. So I'd pop another suppository in. Pretty much just had one in at all times of the day. Maybe I was using like 8 a day or something ridiculous. And it says to not use more than one every 4 hours. I'll tell you what, it got me through it. It would completely numb the pain. I was able to do stuff. I was able to be active. And I tried to be as active as possible. I did a lot of cycling, played some golf while I was there. And I was able to do stuff, but I just had to take a lot of time to rest and actually take those naps, like I said. Diet-wise, I was a lot more strict on my diet at this point than I was when I was in Florida. And at the time, I had decided the breakfast for me was to have some toast with avocado on it and 4 eggs. And this was to build me back up. And I did have a little bit of Marmite on there too. That's going to be a contentious thing there. I thought that this meal was the thing that was going to heal me. And to be honest, it did really help. I had this the whole time I just came out of hospital, and it allowed me to regain the weight that I had lost. As an aside, taking this breakfast every day brought me back, 8 kilos of body weight. So it really did work, good proteins, good fats. questionable on the toast. You could swap that out. But at the time, my body was like ravenous. It wanted to regain weight because I think I lost about 10 kilos and I was being very active while I was at Center Parcs. So diet was a big thing, but I was not very strict on eating. Later on, I would just eat whatever because my body was ravenous for calories and it wanted to regain weight. Now, the thing is, I did not want to let my fatigue ruin the holiday. So I tried my best to have a great time. I just had to take that time to go to sleep, halfway through the day. And sometimes I remember there was this one time where I was walking along the seafront to do an activity. I think it was crazy golf. And it just got to the point where the fatigue washed over me so hard. It felt like I was really struggling to exist. So I just went back to the cabin and I went back to sleep because I just could not function. But overall, it was a great holiday. I really enjoyed it. And I documented the whole thing. So I've got this whole video of it that's quite nice to look back at. So I want to talk to you about key takeaways to consider before you go on holiday. And number one is to take an account of your symptoms. If you're currently in flare and you've got a booked holiday coming up, is your flare really bad? And I will use a real life example that I have talked about. It was the first video I had on this channel. So what had happened was I booked these tickets to go to my cousin's wedding in America and my flare was just getting very, very intense. And I had to come up with the decision to just cancel it. And the thing is, cancelling it was painful because when I cancelled it, I could not get a refund on the hotel that I had booked. So much money wasted. The plane only refunded me credit to the airline, which again, that was painful too. So I had lost thousands of pounds. But if I went on that holiday, who knows what would have happened? Because the weeks following that, I was in hospital. So ultimately, it was a good decision to not go to America because if I had gone there and the flare had struck me down, what would I have done? I would have probably had been so much more pounds/dollars in debt because I would have had to use the American healthcare system. Whereas instead, I used the English healthcare system. I used the NHS. I went to hospital. I was in my hometown, so I wasn't stuck abroad. But anyway, that's the key here. Really, if you're about to go away and you're questioning, there's a lot of doubt and it's like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this, and your flare is really ramping up, consider cancelling that holiday. It's not going to be worth it. Unless it's all up to you at the end of the day. But I'm just saying, if the flare is not subsiding, I wouldn't want to be caught out in a different country and a flare really ramp up and you need to go to hospital. I would just say, I'll put this off. I will just not go. So the next key takeaway is to prepare all of your supplements and medications ahead of time and package them in clear packaging. If they're prescribed medications, bring it in its original packaging. Maybe even bring along your prescription just in case any airlines or anyone questions you and they're like, where's your prescription? Is this medication for you? And if you're bringing supplements, just bring them all in their original packaging. Consider even buying a short-term supply for the time that you're away and keep it sealed. So then there's no question as to what's in there. Bring it all in a clear bag so they can look straight into it. And that way you'll reduce any chances of you having to be stopped and searched because they might query like, what are these pills that you've got? So that's the way that I've always done it. It's done me well. And I will also say, bring extra medication as well. I actually put some medication in different bags because I thought, well, if this bag goes missing, then I've still got medication in my main bag. So I was like extra prepared and I brought more than enough medication than I needed for that trip, just in case that I lost any. Maybe that's a bit of over preparation, but in the instance that you're abroad and you lose your bag, you'll be very thankful that you've got your backup medication in another bag because, like, again, you don't want to be caught out in a foreign country without your medications. What if a flare happens while you're away? I'd be very strict on your taking your medications. Do not skip it while you're away because a flare is the last thing we want when you're not at home near your local hospital or doctor. It's the last thing that we want. If you do start experiencing a mild flare while you're away, then just take that time that you need to rest and recover. Take time to lie down if gut cramps start coming around. If you do see blood, do not panic because you probably aren't going to be away for that long and the flare's not really going to progress much in that time. As long as you stay relaxed about it, don't freak out, just give yourself the rest, keep your diet on point, and hopefully that will mitigate the chances of it progressing. Now, I know it's not going to stop the chances of it progressing. I'd say reducing that stress and not worrying about it is probably one of the best things that you can do anyway. While you're there, just focus on eating whole foods as much as you can. Avoid all the crap while you're on holiday. Just because you're away doesn't mean you can eat shit, because that will immediately catch up with you. So really just focus on getting the right foods that your body can use nutritionally. And so just to cap this whole video off with the final key takeaway is, don't forget the key elements of health, and that's your diet, your sleep, and your exercise, because those three things is what's going to really truly keep you healthy and happy past all of this. Like when you get back home and all, focus on those three things. I call them the trifecta of health, because I really truly 100% wholeheartedly believe that if you focus on these three things all in tandem, then it will keep you healthy, because it's what has been keeping me healthy since I got out of hospital. So if you'd like to hear about how I did end up in hospital just before my cousin's wedding, then click this video that's popped up here and I'm going to tell you the whole story.